Imagine this. You wake up late again. Not because you're tired, though you are. Not because you don't care, though part of you has stopped pretending. But because something inside feels too heavy to lift. You stare at the ceiling. Your body moves slowly, as if submerged underwater. The day waits for you. Emails, chores, obligations. But you don't move. You scroll. You sigh. You delay. And somewhere between the fourth video and the second apology message you'll never send, the guilt creeps in again. You tell yourself what you always do. I'm just lazy. I need to get my act together. You say it like a mantra, a curse disguised as accountability. But what if it's not true? What if laziness isn't your disease, but your diagnosis gone wrong? What if what you call laziness is something far more human and far more misunderstood? Because let's be honest, you weren't always like this. There was a time you had curiosity, passion, wonder, even ambition. You wanted to do things, become something, feel alive. So what happened? How did drive become dread? How did focus become fog? How did dreams turn into digital distractions and postponed plans? And most of all, why does the world feel so far away? And you feel so far from yourself? There's something hollow in your chest you can't name. You try to outrun it with productivity hacks, caffeine, endless self-help videos. You punish yourself for not trying harder. You envy those who do. You drown in shame, then float into numbness. And the loop continues. But deep down, something doesn't add up. Because if you were truly lazy, why does it hurt so much? Why do you carry the weight of unmet potential like a stone inside your ribs? Why does the idea of wasting your life feel like a grief you've already begun to mourn? Here's a paradox for you. What if laziness isn't the absence of effort, but the paralysis of misdirection? What if you're not unmotivated, but unconvinced? Not unwilling, but unseen? Not incapable, but disoriented? What if what the world calls lazy is really a soul crying out for meaning? And what if that cry isn't weakness, but your last line of defense against a life that doesn't fit? Think about it. We live in a culture that worships motion, but fears direction. We're told to keep moving, keep achieving, keep optimizing, without ever asking, for what? You learned how to be efficient, how to appear capable, how to fit timelines and templates. But did anyone ever teach you how to listen to your inner compass? Did anyone ever ask you what your soul actually needs? Number, they gave you expectations. They gave you scripts. They gave you dopamine in the form of likes and progress bars. And now, here you are, burned out without burning, tired without moving, grieving a version of yourself you can't even picture anymore. That's not laziness. That's being lost. And being lost doesn't mean you're broken. It means your inner world no longer matches the map you were given. Maybe your body knows something your mind refuses to admit. Maybe it's not that you can't get up. It's that your soul is tired of standing up for things that no longer matter. So before you punish yourself again, before you spiral into another shame cycle, ask the question that most never dare to face. What if your laziness is really a protest, a signal, a sacred pause? What if something inside you is still alive enough to resist becoming a machine? And what if the key to moving forward isn't forcing yourself to work harder, but learning to reorient your life around what's real? That's not weakness, that's wisdom. But to get there, you will have to dig. Deeper than productivity, deeper than motivation, deeper than goals and deadlines and guilt. You'll have to go to the source. Because the issue isn't that you're lazy. The issue is that you've been disconnected from your why, divorced from your meaning, and sold a vision of success that never belonged to you. And so, you stopped. Not because you don't care, but because your soul refused to walk further down a road that leads to nowhere. Let's follow that refusal. Let's trace it back to its root. Let's ask the question modern life doesn't want you to ask. What if your dysfunction is a symptom of misalignment, not failure? Let's begin. Let's go deeper. Because if you are not lazy, if your paralysis is not a failure of will but something more profound, then the question becomes, what exactly has gone wrong inside us? Why do so many people feel this creeping fog of inertia, this quiet despair that looks like procrastination but feels like grief? To answer that, we must leave the realm of surface fixes and enter the murky depths of psychology, philosophy, and modern disconnection. Because the roots of this problem grow in soil much older and darker than any to-do list. The myth of motivation. We've been taught that motivation is a fuel, something you summon, generate, or manifest. That if you just try hard enough, visualize hard enough, want it enough, you'll rise. But this belief ignores a brutal truth. You can't force the human spirit to move in directions it doesn't believe in. Motivation is not fuel. It is a compass. And if the direction is wrong, the soul will simply not walk. The philosopher Viktor Frankl, survivor of Nazi concentration camps and founder of logotherapy, understood this more than anyone. He wrote, "When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure." And distraction is exactly what modern life offers in abundance. We are drowning in stimulation, dopamine loops, endless content, quick validation, but starving for significance. We consume more, connect less. We perform more, feel less. We achieve more, understand less. And the soul, unable to grow in such shallow soil, retreats. That retreat is what we call laziness. Carl Jung and the War Within. Carl Jung believed the human psyche was not one unified being, but a complex system of parts: the ego, the persona, the shadow, the self. He warned of the danger of over-identifying with the persona, the mask we wear to meet society's expectations. And that's exactly where most people live. You've become what you were trained to be: efficient, polished, agreeable, capable. But somewhere in the background, your shadow screams. The parts of you that don't fit into the machine, the dreamer, the rebel, the mystic, the broken, the wild, are exiled. And this psychic split creates a form of spiritual friction. Outwardly, you function. Inwardly, you fragment. You lose access to your vitality not because you're lazy, but because you're split against yourself. Part of you knows you're off course, and part of you is terrified to admit it. Because if you truly accepted that you don't want the life you're living, what would you do? Quit your job? Abandon your goals? Disappoint your parents? Risk judgment? No, better to stay stuck. At least then, no one gets hurt. Except you. Schopenhauer and the tyranny of the will. If Jung spoke to the internal war, Arthur Schopenhauer spoke to the torment behind it. He believed the fundamental force driving all human behavior was a blind, insatiable will to live. A force that seeks endlessly but is never satisfied. According to Schopenhauer, most of human suffering arises not from pain, but from the inability to stop wanting. Now consider how modern society operates. Always push harder, always upgrade, always optimize, always compete. Your value is tied to your output, your worth, to your usefulness. Rest is laziness. Reflection is self-indulgence. Slowness is failure. And so your will is hijacked, fed into a system that rewards constant striving but punishes stillness. But the soul doesn't want to strive. It wants to align. And in the absence of alignment, it resists. it stops, it breaks. So the question is not, how do I push myself harder? The question is, what have I been striving for? And is it even mine? Huxley and the Numbing of Meaning. Aldous Huxley, in Brave New World, predicted a dystopia where people wouldn't be oppressed by force, but by pleasure. A society addicted to comfort, distracted by entertainment, chemically numbed against discomfort. Sound familiar? In many ways, our lives have become this prophecy. We don't face catastrophe. We face emptiness. And instead of meaning, we're fed noise. You don't feel lazy because you lack options. You feel overwhelmed by them. You don't feel broken because you can't succeed. You feel disoriented because you don't know what matters anymore. You're not avoiding work. You're avoiding a life you've been taught to want, but secretly dread. Sartre and the Weight of Freedom. Jean-Paul Sartre believed that humans are condemned to be free, that once you realize you are free to choose your life, you also inherit the burden of that choice. And this is the final hidden root of your laziness, existential paralysis. Because freedom terrifies you. Because if you're not living your truth, it's not because you can't, it's because you haven't dared to. And that's the scariest realization of all. So instead, you tell yourself the story that feels safer. I'm lazy. It's cleaner. It implies a fix. It keeps you from facing the deeper truth, that you are free and that your choices shape your soul. But the soul cannot be tricked. It will not move for borrowed dreams. It will not serve false gods. It will not build a life on someone else's map. So it stops, not because it's weak, but because it remembers. This, then, is the true nature of your struggle. You are not battling laziness. You are wrestling with misalignment, with the grief of a self-abandoned, with the silent rebellion of a soul that refuses to live a lie. And this war, hidden from the world, dismissed by the culture, is real, and it matters. But what happens if you ignore it? What does this quiet disconnection turn into over time? Let's go further. Let's explore the unseen consequences of being lost in a world that doesn't want you to be found. It begins subtly. You don't notice the exact moment it starts, only that something begins to feel off. You find yourself zoning out during conversations, not because you're rude, but because you can't summon the energy to care. You avoid mirrors, not because you hate how you look, but because there's something unfamiliar staring back. You sleep more, but rest less. You do less, but feel more exhausted. You're drifting, and the world doesn't notice. Because from the outside, you still function. You show up. You reply. You do just enough to keep suspicion away. But inside, your soul is on life support. The soul shrinks slowly. The most dangerous part of being lost isn't the immediate suffering. It's the slow erosion of your sense of self. You start making decisions you don't believe in. You say yes when you mean no. You work jobs that numb you, pursue goals that don't excite you, spend time with people who drain you. Not because you're weak, but because you're disconnected from your internal compass. And when you live without inner alignment for long enough, something within you starts to decay. Not your body, not your mind, your essence. This decay doesn't look like drama. It looks like routine. You stop reading. You stop asking questions. You stop feeling awe. You stop dreaming. And worst of all, you stop missing those things. That is the soul's quiet collapse. The numbness becomes normal. What begins as misalignment soon morphs into numbness. You don't just feel unmotivated, you feel disengaged from reality itself. You no longer care if something is beautiful, true, or even real, as long as it's easy, as long as it doesn't ask too much of you. as long as it fills the silence. This is where the dopamine loop takes over. You start seeking tiny hits of stimulation just to feel something. A scroll, a snack, a stream, a swipe. The goal isn't pleasure anymore, it's sedation. Your brain, in a state of chronic confusion, begins to adapt to this cycle. You're no longer chasing meaning. You're avoiding the pain of meaninglessness. But the avoidance doesn't heal you. It deepens the split. You begin to live on the surface of your own life. Loneliness in plain sight. Being lost has a unique consequence. You can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. Because connection requires authenticity, and you haven't seen your authentic self in a long time. You laugh on cue. You mirror others. You maintain the illusion. But in the moments when you're alone, in the car, in the shower, in the stillness between distractions, there's a whisper you can't escape. You don't belong here. Not in the world. Not in your work. Not even in your own skin. This kind of loneliness doesn't come from isolation. It comes from self-abandonment. And it's far more lethal. Anxiety without a name. The longer you remain lost, the more your nervous system begins to revolt. You feel anxious, but can't explain why. You feel overwhelmed by the smallest things. You dread waking up, not because life is horrible, but because it's meaningless. You procrastinate not because you're lazy, but because your soul refuses to participate in what feels false. This is existential anxiety, not rooted in danger, but in disconnection from your own truth. You can't meditate it away. You can't biohack it. You can't productivity app your way around it, because it's not a problem to solve. It's a signal, a spiritual alarm that says, you are off course. Learned helplessness. At some point, the mind stops fighting. You've tried to change. You've tried to be better. You've read the books, watched the TED Talks, journaled, bought planners, made vision boards, set alarms, set goals, and nothing stuck. Eventually, you start believing the worst thing of all. This is just who I am. This is the birth of learned helplessness, the quiet acceptance of suffering as your default state. You don't expect joy. You don't expect clarity. You don't expect meaning. You just survive. You lower your standards not because you're humble, but because you're hurt. You no longer dream of being free. You just hope not to drown. The world reflects your disconnection. And here's the cruelest part. The longer you stay lost, the more the world around you begins to mirror that internal disorientation. You attract shallow relationships because you're afraid of being seen. You accept meaningless work because you've stopped believing in your worth. You tolerate emotional starvation because nourishment feels foreign. And eventually, the external world becomes a reflection of the chaos within. Not because you're doomed, but because the unlived inner life always finds a way to show up in the outer world. As Carl Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You may begin to think, this is just how life is, but it isn't. This is not life. This is life on autopilot. This is life without you in it. The trap tightens. Now you're trapped, not in a prison of bars, but of beliefs. You've internalized the voice that once came from outside. You've become your own warden. You punish yourself for struggling in a system designed to starve your soul. You call yourself lazy, unmotivated, a failure. But these are not truths. They are symptoms of misalignment, of meaninglessness, of a culture that trains you to perform, but never to be whole. And unless you intervene, unless you dare to wake up, the trap tightens. Until one day, your greatest fear is not death. It's the possibility that you might never truly live. So now comes the turning point. Because once you've seen the trap, once you've felt its weight, once you've named the ache, you can no longer pretend. You can either go back to sleep, or you can begin the rebellion. And that rebellion starts with remembering who you really are. You've stared into the fog long enough. You've seen what this culture does to your soul when you adapt too well to it. The numbness, the confusion, the quiet collapse of meaning behind a mask of normalcy. Now comes the most terrifying and liberating moment of all. You stop trying to fix yourself. Not because you give up, but because you realize you were never broken. You were misled. And the rebellion doesn't begin with changing the world. It begins with reclaiming your inner world from everything that was never yours. The first act of rebellion: listening to the ache. There's a voice inside you, not the voice that yells, shames, or demands. That's the voice the world gave you. No, beneath that, there's a whisper, a soft but steady call. It asks things like, what do you love, truly? What part of your life feels like a lie? What would you do if you weren't afraid? The first act of rebellion is learning to hear this voice again. Because that voice is your compass. That ache you've been calling laziness, it's a signal, not a symptom. It's your soul protesting the fake life you've been taught to live. Start by listening, not analyzing, not fixing, not scheduling, just listening. Reframing the entire narrative rebellion means rewriting the story. It means replacing the tired self-narrative of, I'm lazy, with the truth, I am misaligned. Once you name it, the entire landscape shifts. You stop beating yourself up for not running faster and start asking if you're even on the right road. This changes everything. You start questioning, why am I doing what I do? Who am I trying to please? Whose life am I performing? The rebellion demands radical honesty. And from that honesty, a new foundation is born, not of productivity, but of purpose. Reconnection over optimization. Modern culture teaches us to optimize, to hack, to maximize. But you don't need another routine. You need a relationship with yourself. Instead of productivity, seek presence. Instead of discipline, seek devotion. Instead of goals, seek alignment. Reconnection is about learning the subtle rhythms of your own being. It's about asking, what gives me energy? What drains me? What feels sacred, even if it looks useless? Begin by noticing what feels like truth in your body, not what sounds smart in your head. This is how the soul begins to breathe again. Shadow work. Making peace with the parts you've abandoned. Carl Jung taught that everything we repress, the shame, the fear, the anger, the dreams we buried, lives in the shadow. And the longer we deny it, the more power it holds over us. Rebellion means turning toward the shadow and saying, you're allowed here too. It means welcoming the part of you that doesn't want to hustle, the part that feels broken, the part that longs for beauty in a world that only values utility. True power comes not from conquering the shadow, but from integrating it. You are not whole until every part of you has a seat at the table. Choosing depth in a shallow world. The modern world wants you shallow, scrolling, reacting, chasing. But you were made for depth. So slow down. Start choosing experiences that move you, not numb you. Read books that awaken old dreams. Take long walks without your phone. Make something with your hands that has no purpose. Have conversations that risk vulnerability. Let silence be part of your day, not as an absence, but as a sanctuary. Choosing depth will make you a stranger to some people. That's okay, because you'll feel at home with yourself for the first time in years. Finding a new North Star. Remember, you can't escape the need for meaning. Humans are meaning-making creatures. When we're denied it, we suffer. But when we rediscover it, even in the smallest ways, we come alive. So what's your North Star? Not your 5-year plan? Not your career path? Not your ideal life? Your true orientation. Ask yourself, what do I stand for? What do I want to contribute to the world, even if no one ever notices? What breaks my heart? What heals it? You don't need perfect answers. You just need a direction that feels honest. The soul doesn't need a GPS. It needs permission to move toward what matters. The courage to be misunderstood. Here's the final truth of the rebellion. If you return to yourself, you will not fit in. You will confuse people. They will ask why you're not chasing what everyone else is chasing. They will think you've lost ambition. They will say you've changed. Let them. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to remember your truth and live in service of it. That's the quiet price of freedom. And it's worth everything. A gentle reminder. This rebellion doesn't need to be loud. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow. You don't have to abandon your responsibilities. You don't have to explain yourself to anyone. Just begin. Begin by saying, I will no longer abandon myself to be acceptable. I will no longer trade aliveness for approval. Even if all you do today is pause. Even if all you do is feel the ache and finally stop judging it. That's enough. Because the moment you stop calling yourself lazy, the moment you recognize the sacred signal beneath your paralysis, you've already begun the return. You've learned how to hear the voice again. You've begun the journey home. But something still remains. A deeper truth. The one that turns everything you've suffered into something sacred. Let's uncover it. Let's name what you've always known, but never dared to say out loud. At last, it becomes quiet. Not the silence of avoidance, not the hush of defeat, but the deep, steady stillness of something sacred returning. You've listened to the ache. You've stepped back from the noise. You've begun to hear yourself again. But now, something profound comes into view. Not a new tactic. Not a breakthrough technique. A truth. One so powerful it reorders your entire understanding of who you are. And here it is. You were never meant to be a machine. You were never meant to be endlessly efficient, perfectly motivated, always performing. You are not a productivity algorithm. You are not a personal brand. You are not a list of goals. You are a human being, a breathing, breaking, remembering creature of depth. And your soul, the very thing modern life tried to erase, is still intact. Bruised, yes. Battered, maybe. But alive. You see, you weren't lost because you're weak. You were lost because you are sensitive in a world that profits from your numbness. You care too deeply in a culture that dismisses depth. You ask too many questions in a society that worships certainty. And when the world didn't mirror your truth, you thought you were the problem. But the ultimate truth is this. You were never lazy. You were grieving. Grieving the self you had to abandon. Grieving the dreams you put aside to survive. Grieving the aliveness you buried just to be acceptable. Laziness is easy to fix. Grief is not. Because grief is sacred. And if you ignore it, you stay stuck in a loop. Always pushing, always crashing, always wondering why it never feels right. But when you honor it, something else happens. You stop reaching outward, and you start listening inward. The soul moves at the speed of meaning. The reason nothing worked, the hacks, the schedules, the shame, is because none of them were in service to your soul. The soul doesn't respond to pressure. It doesn't rush. It doesn't speak in deadlines. The soul responds to meaning. It moves toward beauty, truth, connection, creation. It wakes up when you stop forcing it to perform and start feeding it what it needs. That's why you felt lazy. Because your soul was malnourished, not disinterested. Because you were moving in ways that killed your vitality instead of cultivating it. And now that you've seen it, you can never unsee it. You don't need a new app. You need a new story. You are not behind. Let's clear one more lie. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not wasting your potential. You are awakening, and awakening rarely follows schedules. It happens in strange seasons, through breakdowns, detours, nights that feel endless. But when it comes, it rearranges everything. Suddenly, the years you spent numb weren't wasted. They were preparing you, softening you, breaking just enough of your false self for the truth to come through. So don't rush your return. Let it be slow. Let it be sacred. Let it be yours. The pain was the portal. Now you can see it clearly. What you called laziness was a warning light. What you called failure was a doorway. What you thought was the end was actually the beginning of truth. Your body never betrayed you. Your spirit never gave up. They were both trying to tell you something. You're not supposed to live like this. Not in a state of constant comparison. Not under the tyranny of productivity. Not estranged from your own emotions. The pain was not punishment. It was a portal to freedom, to authenticity, to wholeness. You just had to trust it long enough to hear what it was saying. The sacred return. Now comes the most important choice of all. You can step back into the old life, masked, managed, exhausted. Or you can honor what you've uncovered here. You can build a life that fits your soul instead of forcing your soul to fit your life. It doesn't require perfection. It doesn't require reinvention. It requires presence. Choosing work that nourishes, not just pays. Choosing relationships that see, not just tolerate. Choosing days that allow space for silence, for wandering, for wonder. This is the sacred return. The slow, steady reorientation toward you. Not the you that pleases everyone. Not the you that impresses. Not the you that performs wellness. The you who is alive, even in confusion, even in chaos, even in stillness. A final reflection. If you take only one thing from this, let it be this. Your laziness was never a flaw. It was a flare, a distress signal from your soul, asking, "Is this really the life you want?" And now you've answered. Not with a resolution, not with a 30-day plan, but with a shift so deep the world will feel different because you are different. You're no longer trying to be who the world told you to be. You're remembering who you were before you forgot. And that is what real transformation looks like. So take a breath. The war within you is not over, but the tide has turned. You've stepped out of the fog. You've found your footing. And now you walk forward, not with urgency, but with intention. You're not lazy. You're awakening. You're returning. You're home.